Thank you, Ben.
Thank you.
Okay, our next speaker is Susan Assey from Harvard, and she will talk about design auction-based marketplaces.
So I'm here to talk about some research that I've been doing in collaboration with a number of co-authors, including Denis Nekopolov from Berkeley and Glenn Ellison from from MIT. And we've been doing this research at MSR over the last couple of years. So I wanted to talk about a class of markets called platform markets. These kinds of markets are very important to Microsoft, but they've also attracted a lot of attention from economists in recent years, not on the least because of regulatory scrutiny of companies, including Microsoft. And platform markets are markets where there's at least two groups of customers, and there's some externalities like indirect network effects. So just as an example, on your Windows Phone, you care about how many other Windows Phone users there are, in part because it makes more applications available on the Windows Phone. So that's an indirect network effect. And the platform can set prices and design the marketplace in order to help internalize those externalities. So the focus of my research has been on auction-based platforms. And here at Microsoft, I've been working on online advertising markets, both search and display. But other classic examples of auction-based marketplaces are used car markets, B2B markets, and eBay. And in all of these markets, one of the things that I want to focus on is how much market design matters, not just the design of the auction itself, but the design of the overall marketplace, and thinking of it as a platform. So in an auction-based platform, there's an auction that's used to match buyers and sellers and determine a transaction price. So the auction is it serves a couple of roles. It's a method for sorting, and it's also a method for the platform to extract revenue. So if you think about on eBay, you match a buyer and seller according to bids in an auction. So it's determining who transacts. And it also is potentially, depending on how you structure the fees, is going to determine what the platform gets. In online advertising, you auction off the rights to show your advertisement to the consumer, and so it's a way of choosing which advertisement is shown, as well as raising revenue for the publisher or the search engine. So using an auction is going to limit the discretion of the market maker. I can't just go out and charge a different price to one firm or another if I've committed to using an auction. But there's actually a fair bit of discretion left. And if you've been following a lot of the news about Google lately, there's been a lot of discussion about the extent to which the search auctions are pure auctions and very decentralized, or whether, in fact, the market designer plays an important role in allocation. And I can tell you from looking under the hood and working in collaboration with Ad Center for a couple of years, there's a huge role for the market maker. There are all sorts of things going on in the background, algorithms that determine who is even eligible for the auction, quality scores that help determine prices and rankings, and so on. So at the center of the platform, there's an auction, but also matching algorithms, scoring algorithms, and so on that help determine the allocation. Even on eBay, where it seems like it's a little more straightforward, there's just auctions between the buyers and sellers. In a visit to meet with eBay executives about designing their marketplace, they told me one of the most important things that they had done in the last few years was to change their search algorithms, to change which buyers and which sellers a buyer sees when they search for an object. And there's all sorts of implications of what happens. Say if you prioritize low shipping costs, all the sellers out there might change their shipping companies. So you can have a lot of changes to the platform market by just changing the rules. So when we think about designing a platform market, we want to focus on efficiency and long-term participation. And participation is especially important with competing platforms. The platform wants to make money, but they want to minimize distortions, and they especially want to keep the more sensitive side of the market engaged. So we see, for example, in search that search is free. You don't pay to use Google or Bing. Yellow pages are given out for free. There are many markets where, in fact, one side is not charged at all, and it's more efficient for the platform to charge the other side of the market, say the advertisers. So auction design matters broadly, not just getting the right game form, but actually when you choose how the auction is structured, you're going to determine what profits people get, how valuable the platform is to the users and the advertisers. That determines who participates, and that's going to be important for the long-term health. So when we go to influence market design, one of the neat things about doing this research at Microsoft has been that I can actually get in and change the way the markets are designed. You have to start with a theoretical economic framework, and so I've done some research with Glenn Ellison developing a model of search advertising from a platform perspective. One of the things that's important when you develop models that are going to be useful in practice is that the parameters can be estimated with data to resolve trade-offs. There's often a trade-off between how much money you make in the short run, how much money each of the participants make, or how much utility consumers get, and then that's the long-term success of your platform. Data and experimentation also play a really crucial role. So data is going to be used to estimate these models to help evaluate the trade-offs and determine what kinds of designs will work. Experimentation is also crucial, but it has a lot of limitations. So everything in search goes through an experiment. Every time you do a search on Google, every time you do a search on Bing, you are part of an experiment. You're in the treatment group, you're the control group. Nothing changes without an experiment. But they're also limited because experiments are usually short-term. We take 1% of traffic, advertisers don't notice the experiment, and so advertisers don't respond. And so you get lots of discoveries in the industry about how things that you did in your short-term experiment don't at all work out the way you expect them to in the long term. So economic models can help predict that long-term response, which can't be learned from a short-term experiment. So one part of empirical economics focuses on putting structure on empirical analysis to learn model primitives, like that's to learn the advertiser profits and values, and then perform counterfactuals. What would happen if I changed reserve prices in the longer run? So just as an example, with Dennis Nekopolov from Berkeley, we've studied search advertising using data from Microsoft's Ad Center. And so we showed that you can reformulate the problem of the search advertising auctions as the problem of an advertiser choosing how many clicks to buy. It's essentially choosing what position they're in, which determines how many clicks they get. And the more clicks you want to buy, the higher position you have to be in, the more expensive are the clicks. So there's an increasing marginal cost curve. And we can basically look out at the advertisers, see how many clicks they're buying. We can estimate the marginal cost of clicks using the auction data. And then we can infer what value the bidder must have had to make this choice of clicks optimal. They're going to set their value equal to the marginal cost. So this is just a picture of the incentives faced by a particular bidder on a high-value search phrase in Ad Center. And the red curve, the marginal cost curve, that's estimated from the data. The number of clicks, the blue vertical line, that's the number of clicks the advertiser bought. They were around in the second position, getting about half as many clicks as they could have gotten in the first position. And so we infer the green line is the value they must have had. That's the value that would equate marginal cost equal to value and make their choice of clicks optimal. So we can do this using the Ad Center auction data for every bidder and figure out what values we expect that they should have had. Of course, it's not going to be perfect, but it's a good approximation. Once you know people's preferences, we can simulate the outcome of lots of different changes to the games, the kinds of things that the ad platform does on a regular basis. We can predict the long-run impact of changes in reserve prices, changes in quality scoring mechanisms. Should we stick with the current generalized second price auction mechanism, or should we use something called a Vickrey auction, which is more efficient? And so qualitatively, one of the things that comes out of this research is that search advertising platforms actually face substantial trade-offs between efficiency and revenue extraction. If they just want to make money in the short run, they can sell less advertising space, they can bias the auctions against the strong bidders, say the bidders that have the highest value, and make more profit. But that can hurt them in the long run. And so the economic models are really crucial for balancing that out. Thanks.
Okay, thank you, Susan. Time for a few questions.
And let me ask like this: will economic robustness for the auction mechanism, like truthfulness or collusion resistance, will be their main concern in your structure?
Sure. So it turns out that the auctions that are currently used don't create incentives to bid your value. And so that's one of the reasons these models are so important. If they ran an auction that induced advertisers to just bid their value, it would be easier to figure out what those values were, and you could do simulations much more easily. So one of the things we have to factor in are the actual incentives faced by the bidders. And a lot of the econometric work, the statistical work, is in actually estimating those incentives so we can figure out how much bid shading the advertisers did in practice.
Time for another question. Okay, Joel.
Another baseball question. StubHub, which is certainly an auction, but I mean, many people believe that the fox is running the chicken coop, that you know, that it's just being run by the owners in an unfair way. I don't know whether that's true or not, but some people even believe that about some of the other search engines. And my question is what about the fox and the chicken coop, and what about the role of government in preventing abuses of these auction schemes?
Those are excellent questions. So one thing that you face as a trade-off for a market designer is how transparent you want to be. So when economists give advice, one of the things we emphasize is that if you're transparent, that's going to help increase participation in the marketplace. It's going to help people be willing to reveal their values rather than try to game the system, or at least bid sort of straightforwardly. When you have market designs that aren't transparent, people worry about how you're going to use their information. And I would say that the current sort of search advertising environment has become less and less transparent. And so I don't think any search engine could claim that it's just a decentralized auction and that, you know, yes, you know, the rules are all completely written on the internet and there's nothing more you need to understand. There's reserve prices, there's all sorts of thresholds, and those can be used to trade off the revenue extraction against the efficiency of the allocation. So, you know, I think that it's, you know, they don't want to, there's lots of reasons that are given for not putting all your cards on the table, including if you put too many cards, people might game the rules. It also ties your hands for the future. But, you know, you can certainly argue that some platforms might do better to have more transparency. But if you're a monopoly, if you have a monopoly access to consumers, if you have 80% of the search users, or in Europe, if you have 95% of the search users, the advertisers will come. It doesn't really matter how transparent you are, and so your incentives may be reduced to you know, stick with this certain set of rules.
Okay, thank you, Susan.